My childhood was surrounded by shadows that I scarcely understood. My first steps were taken in a home that seemed to exist in a constant winter, cold, silent, and devoid of hope. The faces of the people who were supposed to care for me were distorted by fear, anger, and neglect. Whenever I sought comfort, I found only more darkness, as if an invisible entity lurked behind me, pushing me further into a labyrinth of despair. Nights were the worst. The silence was so heavy it seemed to scream, and dreams were almost non-existent, replaced by nightmares that invaded my mind like intruders. There were no words of affection, only empty, threatening looks, or worse still, absolute indifference. The loneliness of that place wrapped around me like a persistent shadow, and I, so small, felt there was no one to protect me, to save me. My childhood was not marked by great visible tragedies, but rather by a series of small fractures that accumulated like invisible scars. Each silent abuse, each subtle neglect, shaped a wound that never properly healed. I tried to understand, but my emotions were a whirlwind of fear, shame, and the constant feeling that I was unwelcome in this world. Sometimes, feeling beyond what words could explain, I sensed that my soul bore a weight too heavy for someone so young. It was a silence etched on my expression, a sadness that seemed to cling to my essence, making me feel that perhaps something inside me was dying silently before it even had a chance to be born. I always felt that, in those moments, this darkness was an extension of the universe itself, a trap condemning me to an existence without light, without hope, without peace. It was a silent life where the sky never opened, and the stars seemed to have been extinguished before they even shone. As I grew older, that darkness seemed to intensify, like an ever-growing shadow that took over everything around me and inside me. My youth was marked by a desperate search for meaning, for any light that could illuminate this gloomy path. But all I found was silence and loneliness. I tried to hide behind a facade I could barely sustain. Friendships were superficial, like a thin coat of paint barely covering the emptiness within. I felt displaced, as if my soul was a missing piece of a puzzle that never quite fit anywhere. Perhaps because deep inside, I knew something within me was slowly fading. Hope, purpose, genuine joy. There were nights when I felt my life was nothing more than a shadowed existence, veiled by a dark cloud. Desperate, I sought an escape. Sometimes in fleeing, sometimes in anger, other times in utter silence. But even then, I sensed an ever-present watcher, like something lurking, eyeing the worst part of me, waiting for a moment of weakness. It was an oppressive sensation, as if something was slowly consuming me from the inside out, with no way to stop it. My alienation also showed in the feeling that nothing had any meaning. School, work, small pleasures, all felt empty, fleeting illusions that quickly dissolved under the weight of my own despair. I began to believe that perhaps my existence was nothing more than a shadow of a life that never truly began. And so, gradually, loneliness became my daily companion. An invisible shadow curled inside my chest, nourished by a monstrous fear that nothing was truly possible. That everything I tried to build was destined to fall apart, to be lost in the endless darkness that consumed me from within, like a story that would never make sense. There were moments when pain threatened to destroy me. That pain was not just physical, but rooted deep in the soul, an endless agony that nearly made me disappear. It felt as if my strength was draining away with each passing day, and the weight of suffering kept intensifying, dragging me along a road with no exit, no hope. I remember nights when my body throbbed with an almost unbearable intensity, a relentless hammering that refused to let up. And in the silence of that space, squeezed between sleep and wakefulness, my mind filled with dark thoughts, questions with no answers. What did I do to deserve all this torment? How much longer could I endure? Another day, one more hour, one more minute? Sadness and despair blended together, forming a thick mixture that seemed to want to drown me. I tried to hold on to anything for survival. A fleeting hope, a distant memory of better days, a gust of courage that appeared out of nowhere. But all of it shattered before the pain, which seemed to arise from nowhere as well, almost as if an entity sought to consume me completely. With every attempt to resist, I felt my mind fragment a little more, as if my emotions were at war inside me. It was a struggle against an invisible enemy, a faceless foe who knew me well, the despair that screams the loudest when everything seems lost. And at that dark moment, I realized I might be reaching the very limits of what I could endure. My hope was on the verge of vanishing, like a candle about to be extinguished during the fiercest storm. The feeling of standing at the edge of the abyss, about to fall into total darkness, seemed inevitable. The pain was so cruel that I nearly believed it would take over me forever, that I would succumb, that nothing could stop whatever was consuming my being, dragging me to a place of no return. That night, everything changed. The pain had become an endless torment, and I felt my strength truly slipping away. Every breath was a struggle. Every heartbeat sounded like a whispered farewell. It was as if a heavy curtain was slowly closing before my eyes, and the world around me was dissolving into darkness. Suddenly, a sensation of rapid weight overwhelmed me, a force surging from within, as if an invisible road was opening. My vision darkened, not gradually, but as if a curtain was ripped abruptly apart. My body was taken over by an unseen power, a gravity pulling me out of myself, a force that seemed to want to cast me out of my own flesh, my very being. I felt a strong pressure in my head, a sensation that everything inside me was dispersing, like the essence of my life being drawn from my physical body to an unknown place. My heart pounded uncontrollably, while my mind flooded with a confused mixture of fear, despair, and deep sadness, as if I were witnessing a farewell scene I could never reverse. And then I realized my emotions and consciousness were dissolving, like atoms of a structure that would never be rebuilt. The last thing I managed to sense was that I was passing through a door, a seemingly invisible threshold separating me from what I knew, from what was real. An open door leading to an unknown world, taking me beyond the limits of everything I once recognized as my life, my existence. I no longer had control. It felt as if I was being carried away by an invisible force, dismissing my resistance, moving beyond what I could understand. My body, my mind, my soul, all merging into what seemed like a passage, a threshold between what I knew and what awaited me there in the infinite. It was as if a cold, invisible force had seized me, slowly dragging me out of my body. At the exact moment I realized I was vanishing from the physical world, a shadowy presence took over my entire being. It was a sensation of weight, a gravity that didn't come from the ground, but from a much deeper point, a force relentlessly pulling me beyond what I could comprehend. I felt my essence leaving my flesh, my senses fading away like a mist gradually lifting. Every fiber of my body seemed to dissolve into the darkness as an unseen current carried me outward toward a place I couldn't see yet, but could feel as an endless abyss. It was a sensation of dislocation, as if my soul was being gently pulled through a black hole, a doorway opening into emptiness, carrying my emotions and will, everything adrift toward the unknown. That moment was silent, intangible, almost like a suspension of time. There was no pain, only a strange sense of lightness transforming into a kind of point of no return. Like a final sigh, I realized that my essence was no longer tethered to my physical body. It floated, vulnerable, while an invisible force carried me beyond my understanding, crossing that delicate border between life and death, the known and the unknown. I had no control. The shadow made of absolute silence enveloped everything around me, and I, completely defenseless, was carried away by it, further and further from what I once called home, life, myself. And then, my vision blurred, my mind dissolved into that silent crossing as I was forever lost in the darkness that pushed me beyond the limits of what I could comprehend. For a moment, everything became completely dark, a silence that seemed to weigh tons. But then, something different began to emerge in the vast emptiness. A luminous wound, a bright and raw light, split the darkness like an open wound on the soul. It wasn't a welcoming light, but unsettling, almost painful to look at. It radiated an energy that defied description, simultaneously beautiful and terrifying, like a scar that burns deep inside me. It was a light that appeared as an open wound in the darkness, an injury bleeding light slicing through the void with an almost unbearable intensity. In that instant, I felt a strange warmth, a pressure spreading through my entire being, as if something was trying to merge with me or consume me right there, in that fleeting moment of transition. The colors around seemed to vibrate at a frequency that made me dizzy, and at the same time, part of me wanted to flee from that vision. It was an open wound in the vastness of the universe, a silent suffering shining brighter than anything I knew, a luminous scar that seemed to want to hold me captive. My breathing grew heavy, and a deep sense of fear took hold as I realized that this light wasn't a portal to peace. It was a cruel trap, a sign that whatever lay beyond that glow could be something I could never understand or escape. The light sliced through the darkness like an exposed wound, and my mind desperately tried to interpret it all. But it was as if a greater force compelled me to look at it, pleading for understanding. It was a luminous wound, a symbol of both pain and beauty, a scar that revealed the anguish of a universe still hiding unexplored secrets. Secrets I had no control over to escape. Suddenly, the intense light began to morph. What seemed like a luminous wound, a scar of pain in the universe, started to take shape. And then, as if a giant shadow emerged from a dream, the image of a face appeared before me, initially merciful, full of calm and peace, like a promise of salvation. I fixed my eyes on it, trying to understand its presence, grasping for some meaning in those features. But at the same time, an increasing discomfort took hold. The appearance seemed to dissolve, slowly like sand slipping through my fingers. Its skin began to unravel, appearing as if made of smoke, and the eyes, initially kind, turned into dark depths, empty, lifeless, like two black holes. The face I saw was no longer one of comfort, but horror. Its features, initially familiar, became distorted, desecrated by the revelation of its true nature, a manipulating force, a mask of mercy hiding a destructive desire. The expression of peace transformed into a frightening smile, a deceiving mask concealing an endless void. It was as if the very face that promised salvation was, in truth, trying to trap my soul, a web woven with lies and fear. My breath shortened. A cold sensation ran down my spine, an unwavering certainty that this was a trap, a cruel illusion seeking to dominate me, urging me to accept the lie as truth. At that moment, I realized that the face of mercy was but a mask hiding what it truly was, a force bent on consuming hope, destroying the light from within, leaving me forever imprisoned in a web of deception. That face haunted me for a long time, a Reminder that even in the most luminous hope, evil could be hidden, ready to reveal its true face in the darkest hour. At the moment when Jesus' true light appeared, everything around me seemed to clarify, or at least that's what I thought in that instant. It was as if a force of pure mercy arose against that mask of deception, a light cutting like a sword of justice. The confrontation began silently, yet its magnitude was immense. The face that had deceived me before, trying to imprison me in illusion, began to disintegrate before a greater force. Its destructive light shone with an intensity that shattered lies and illusions, and my emotions mingled with fear, hope, and courage. With every passing moment, the battle grew fiercer, the falsehood attempting to hold me, but Jesus' true light grew brighter, invading my mind, my soul, a wave of peace impossible to contain. I felt like a tiny spark caught in a storm of fire, resisting forces that sought to consume me. Every inch of shadow trying to creep in was swept away by that powerful light, illuminating even the darkest corners of my being. It was as if an invisible war was unfolding inside me, fear trying to dominate, hope strengthening, and Jesus' light flooding everything, bringing strength, justice, and the certainty that even in the greatest darkness, truth always prevails. In that moment, I understood resistance was not defeat, but a struggle that allowed me to hold on to my core. Jesus' light erased the lies, dispelling the shadows, and my soul began to slowly recover from that battle. The final fight between good and evil. In the darkest instant, I felt my essence almost being swallowed by the forces seeking to destroy all remaining hope within me. The weight of the darkness was absolute, and my strength seemed exhausted, a battle seemingly lost, as if death itself was there, ready to pull me into its final embrace. But in that moment, something changed. A powerful light burst onto the scene, a presence that could not be ignored. It was Jesus, the true light of hope, piercing through the thick fog of fear and deception with a silent but immense force. His presence erupted like an explosion of mercy, invading every corner of my being, dissolving the shadows that sought to engulf me. Jesus' light enveloped everything, breaking the silence of fear, flooding my soul with an incomparable sense of peace. Even as the forces of darkness persisted, and as my resistance neared its limit, I felt a force that was not mine, an immense strength from the very love of infinity that guaranteed my soul wouldn't be consumed entirely. At that moment, the battle became more than just a physical or spiritual fight. It was a struggle of hope, faith, and perseverance. Jesus' presence invaded every thought, every fear, reminding me that even in the deepest darkness, there is a light that never goes out. And with it, I was able to endure, no matter how despairing the scene. That limit was crossed by a light that dispelled shadows, leaving only one certainty. I was never truly alone, even when all seemed lost. Jesus' force invading that darkness was what held me, the guarantee that, even at the brink of death, true hope still shined. Bright and intense. Suddenly, everything around me began to change. I felt an intense pressure, as if an invisible force was pulling me out, tearing me from within myself. It was a sensation of weight, of something slowly detaching, like opening a window into another world, even though I couldn't fully understand what was happening. For a few moments, everything paused in a silence, a suspension before what seemed to be the next chapter of my existence. It's a hard feeling to describe, a mixture of relief, terror, a release that tears away bits of my essence, elevating me into a state of consciousness beyond the physical body. It was as if all the gravity of my pain, fear, and suffering was being slowly shed, like an heavy cloak I could no longer bear. I sensed a strange lightness, almost as if I was floating, leaving my flesh behind. A weight that had pressed on me for so long, a prison of shadows, pain, and despair, disappeared, as if dissolving into a greater force. Flashes of light and shadow began to dance in my perception as my vision faded between what was tangible and a faint hope for freedom. All that remained was a feeling of abandonment, of a definitive separation from the physical body, a transition that felt inevitable. I sensed as if an invisible bridge was forming, guiding my soul on a journey I had no control over. A path through shadows and lights that awaited me beyond what my eyes could see. And in that suspended moment, I realized that my essence was detaching itself, carrying away all that once was my life in this world, all of it becoming a forgotten memory as the true experience began to unfold beyond any human understanding. For a moment, everything fell silent, a faint peace but heavy with a strange feeling of dislocation. As if I was entering a transition zone, a space that's neither wholly dream nor reality, where colors and sounds blend in a surreal harmony. Scarcely had time to grasp what was happening when I realized I was in a place that seemed both breathtakingly beautiful and terrifying simultaneously. Vibrant colors danced before me, shapes that appeared alive, almost pulsating, as if breathing their own life. It was a jaw-dropping beauty, yet at the same time carrying a weight of anguish, as if everything there was a trap masked as paradise. Sounds echoed from afar, subtle melodies, distant and elusive, like an old song that the soul tries to remember but always slips away through the fingers. It was a strange space where emotions tangled. On one hand, a sense of peace and transcendence. On the other, an unsettling inquietude, a deep worry that all of this might be a cruel illusion. In this strange world, I saw energy entities moving gently, like snowflakes dissolving in the air. Some seemed benevolent, offering silent responses, as if they knew my deepest thoughts, while others bore a threatening aura, like shadows hiding in the darkness. There, everything was a duality, beauty that embraced and terror that threatened. It was an almost incomprehensible dance, a space where the soul was torn between the hope of peace and the fear of what might come. Like a confusing dream journey, every moment of calm was swiftly replaced by doubts, an instinct whispering that all of this could be just an illusion, a trap woven by the universe itself. Thus, between enchantment and fear, I continued to navigate this ocean of conflicting emotions, aware that my journey wasn't over, but that the road was becoming increasingly strange, a planet of intertwined beauty and terror, at the crossroads between what's real and what's mere illusion. Amidst all that storm of colors, sounds, and emotions, I began to realize I was not alone. Energy entities, beings that seemed almost ethereal, made of intertwined light and shadow, hovered around me. Some moved with a disturbing grace, almost as if they were part of the very atmosphere. Their silent, graceful movements floating effortlessly. Others stayed still, observing from a distance, with a presence that seemed to penetrate my soul, hinting at a purpose I could not yet comprehend. They didn't analyze with eyes or words. Communication was silent, an exchange of thoughts and emotions flowing through my mind like an electric current. Some of these entities conveyed messages of justice, that everything had a higher purpose, that my past and present actions still shaped what I was experiencing on this journey. Others, however, had a more threatening aura, a vibration charged with a mix of benevolence and menace, as if they were preparing me for something I still couldn't understand. Strangely, in those moments, I sensed these beings knew my deepest feelings, my fears, my desires, that even I wasn't fully aware of. Their gentle, dance-like movements seemed to serve the purpose of revealing secrets my mind, so tiny before infinity, wasn't ready to accept. In this strange space, I realized that the energy beings had diverse natures, some clearly benevolent, others more distant and unsettling. All of them appeared to be part of an invisible web, a communication that transcended words, a connection surpassing any human understanding. And despite all this strangeness, one thing became clear. My emotions were being touched by something I couldn't fully grasp, but which was at the same time profoundly right and deeply frightening. In that strange space, I realized that ordinary words were no longer necessary. Communication happened through signals, through thoughts that sliced through my mind like a sharp razor, a silent exchange that seemed to transform my consciousness. It was a feeling that my deepest thoughts, my desires, my pains, were being read and interpreted by invisible forces that had nothing to do with human language. It was a connection that transcended understanding, a kind of mental language, an exchange of emotions, a flow of messages directly inscribed into my very essence. I felt almost physically that all of this held a purpose of justice and truth, a higher understanding beyond what my limited mind could grasp. But at the same time, a deep doubt gnawed at me. Who were they on the other side? Benevolent beings, or something darker? Communication didn't come in sentences, but in signals vibrating in my mind like imperceptible whispers. Sometimes, a single idea was transmitted, a message that everything is connected. There is a greater purpose, or you must understand your role in this journey. Other times, I simply sensed a vibration of silence carrying enormous meaning, like the very core of the universe speaking to me, challenging me to understand my situation. Closing my eyes, it felt as if my thoughts were being captured by energy waves crossing space, a spiritual dialogue with something beyond. All I knew, it was a communication of cruel delicacy, of silent justice that, in its purity, carried hardness too, a truth that pierced deep within me. I sensed that this exchange went far beyond words. It was a profound understanding, revealing mysteries and secrets hidden within the soul of all that exists. A direct read, without masks, without illusions, a connection making me realize that everything there is being recorded in the infinite web of the universe. Suddenly, in the middle of that strange space, everything around me started to transform. Rapid images, flashes of a life that wasn't necessarily mine, flooded my mind. Scenes of pain, suffering, and forgiveness that seemed to have occurred eons ago, or maybe just minutes. It was as if my experiences, my actions, my choices had become tangled in a cosmic web that extended beyond time and space. I saw myself in multiple lives, in different bodies, in situations of pain and joy, conflict and redemption. Each scene carried a different emotion: sadness, shame, regret, hope, moments where my soul felt the weight of its deeds and at the same time tried to redeem itself. I understood that these images weren't random, they were part of a grand design, a mechanism of universal justice. Every suffering endured or inflicted, every act of kindness or hatred, had its weight. These rapid scenes revealed a deep connection between everything I had done and everything I still needed to understand. Before me, these past lives intertwined in a kind of film, a visual story of my journey of learning, suffering, and forgiveness. Without judgment, only raw truth. My soul still bore scars from actions that needed healing, understanding, and above all, forgiveness. It was a kaleidoscope of pains and joys, a reminder that, as part of something greater, my actions carried consequences that could not be ignored. At that moment, I realized that even beyond death, my essence was being shaped and refined by an invisible thread connecting me to everything and everyone, a never-ending quest for balance and true freedom. Suddenly, a light began to form before me, a light that promised hope, peace, and freedom. It radiated softly but irresistibly. It seemed to invite me to follow its glow, like a promise of rest and liberation from all pain. But as my eyes fixed on it, A shiver ran down my spine. This was no ordinary light. It wielded a cruel magnetism. Its energy seemed to seduce my soul, a false promise of eternal peace hiding a trap. It was as if it was saying, "Come here, and everything will be resolved." But instinctively I knew there was a prison concealed as hope. The light shined with an intensity so blinding that my entire perception was enveloped in a dazzling glare. Yet deep inside, I felt a profound cold, as if being drawn into an invisible trap. It was an invitation that could be an eternal prison, an illusion designed to imprison my soul within this shining surface, preventing it from moving forward, from evolving. My mind, still caught between conflicting emotions, tried to resist, but the temptation was too strong. Everything about this seemed so perfectly logical, so angelic, that my soul nearly believed I could be lost in that very instant. And at the same time, a deep fear arose. The fear that this light was a deception, a false hope that would cast me into an endless cycle of doubts and despair. In the silence, I understood that this light was a cruel trap, an illusion that all had ended, a false promise of eternal rest. But my essence wavered between falling into this seduction or fighting against it, knowing that true peace could only come from outside the temptations, beyond the illusion of hope that in reality was plotting to imprison my soul forever. For a moment, I was fixated on the light, on that deceptive hope. But suddenly, it began to transform before my eyes. That face, which initially seemed merciful, slowly dissolved, revealing something horrifying, a mask hiding the true essence of what was within. The shining skin turned into a worn, weathered mask, aged by time, like a shadow crept across a structure of suffering. Its features started to distort. The smile that promised peace became a terrifying grimace, a mask concealing an emptiness that consumed me from within. Its eyes, once glowing with false benevolence, turned deep and dark, endless black holes with no bottom. The face that seemed to offer salvation was actually revealed as a frightening aberration, a force that manipulates and deceives, a lie disguised as mercy, while its true nature was exposed. An entity seeking to trap my soul within a web of illusions and fear. In that instant, a shiver of terror coursed through me, as if my deepest emotions, hope, faith, fear, were being shattered by that face which, in its deception, tried to conceal its true nature. Every trait that seemed kind dissolved, revealing a horrifying truth. A force that desires to consume all light, all hope, behind a mask of false tranquility. That illusionary face was not my salvation, but my greatest threat. And standing before it, I realized my fight wasn't over. The battle between deception and truth, between good and evil, was still raging. That frightening visage was a cruel reminder that not everything that appears beautiful is truly good. Sometimes it is just a mask, an entrapment meant to imprison my soul within fear and illusion. Suddenly, an overwhelming force was revealed. A pure light, intense and brilliant, sliced through everything around me like a lightning strike of justice. It was as if all darkness and deceit were torn apart by an unforgettable power. Jesus. Light came as a presence that pierced through my emotions and my soul, dismantling the mask of deception with a force of pure mercy and justice. That light wasn't merely bright. It was a force capable of piercing through lies, clarifying what was real and what was illusion. It invaded every thought, every feeling of fear or hope, making it clear that truth, no matter how difficult to bear, would always prevail. Its light resembled a sword of truth that cut through shadows, exposing everything that tried to hide in darkness. At that moment, I realized my struggle wouldn't end there, but that it was a matter of discovering who I truly was. Jesus' light did not come as a threat. It was a force of justice, a powerful mercy that revealed the path to genuine liberation. And even in the face of the terrifying face that disguised itself as mercy, this brilliant light persisted in revealing the truth. That justice exists, peace exists, and my soul still held hope, even amid the greatest darkness. In that clarity, I felt my essence being protected by this force. Jesus' light refused to let lies stand, and in its presence, all pain and fear slowly dissolved. It was a force that cut through deceptions, freeing my soul from the imprisonment of fear, revealing the real mercy, strong, just, and eternal. In the silence of that space, I felt the full weight of the battle raging inside me. It was as if deceit and illusion tried to envelop me, pulling my essence into a vortex of darkness, while Jesus' light radiated a force that stubbornly aimed to keep my soul aligned with the truth. For a moment, I looked around at everything: shadows, illusions, masks of falsehood, and I realized that my only hope was to resist, even as my strength waned. Every inch of shadow trying to creep in was swept away by waves of light, by a force greater than anything I had felt before. It was a desperate resistance, a silent fight, where hope came from knowing that even in the greatest darkness, Jesus' true mercy would never extinguish. Jesus' light flickered throughout the environment like an explosion of power, destroying lies, crushing the cruelest illusions, and erasing shadows that tried to take hold of my mind and heart. His powerful presence made all the difference, a force of resistance that went beyond my fear, my pain, and my exhaustion. And in that moment, I understood that my survival depended on my ability to resist, fighting against what sought to destroy me, holding onto the hope that truth would always prevail. The battle was silent but fierce. Each wave of Jesus' light invading that darkness was a victory against deception, a reaffirmation that his mercy is stronger than all the lies in the universe. And even with my resistance nearly exhausted, I felt a certainty. My soul was still fighting, and this strength, fueled by Jesus' presence, was the guarantee that the truth would never fade, even in the midst of the deepest darkness. For a moment, I thought everything would be lost. The forces of darkness reached their peak, a brutal, almost unbearable resistance trying to engulf me in an irrevocable darkness. My despair mingled with fear, with the urge to give up, to let the shadow take me into its eternal prison. I felt that it might be the end. One last fight, a final battle in which everything could be lost. But at that moment, something changed. A powerful light appeared, stronger, purer, invading that space of darkness with a force I had never experienced before. It was Jesus. His light shined like a sun, breaking through the darkness and cutting through all the lies and illusions, trying to imprison me like a sword of mercy and justice. The strength of this light was brutal but filled with love. It spread to every corner of the darkness, destroying shadows, dissolving lies, removing masks. Supported by his presence, I felt my resistance strengthen. That boundary of despair was finally shattered, and the scene around me began to transform. Despite the fear, pain, and the battle against darkness, I realized I was no longer alone. Jesus' force invaded every space, granting me hope and peace. His presence was the greatest proof that, even in the greatest darkness, divine mercy never abandons the soul seeking its light. In that moment, I understood that true resistance is trusting in the power of love and truth. Even in the final phase of conflict, Jesus brought victory. A victory that guaranteed my survival, my liberation. And with him, hope is never lost. It just waits for its moment to shine. When my eyes finally opened, the surrounding light seemed distorted. The feeling was that I had returned on a fragile thread of hope, like a delicate bridge connecting two sides of the same existence. My head spun, confusion blending with relief and terror, to still be alive, to feel the air entering my lungs, yet knowing that something inside me had changed irrevocably. It was as if my soul had been pulled from one universe into another, now incomplete, fragmented. Every breath felt like a struggle, between accepting that I had truly returned and the fear that all this was an illusion, the consequence of a heavy dream my mind couldn't fully comprehend. Gradually, I perceived that my presence still carried an invisible mark from that confrontation, and that my consciousness, though back in my body, remained lost between two worlds. The feeling of being lost was immense. I had escaped what seemed to have consumed me completely, yet I still sensed shadows insisting on pulling me back into the abyss. The presence of Jesus, who had invaded my darkest moments with a force of peace, now felt distant, almost like a breeze trying to envelop me so I wouldn't lose hope altogether. Everything was confusing. My emotions, my perceptions, and that emptiness making me wonder whether my soul would finally find rest, or if it was doomed to this eternal struggle between light and shadow. But one thing was certain: hope, however small, still burned within me, nourished by that divine force left behind, a whisper that the fight for resistance was not over. As soon as I managed to move a little more, I realized how shattered my emotions were. It was as if my soul was in pieces, trying to put itself back together after the ordeal I'd just endured. What I left in the darkness seemed to breathe behind me, a silent promise that it could return at any moment, a shadow that kept haunting me. The fear that all of this might come back, that the darkness was still lurking, slowly consumed me. My head throbbed, and my breathing was uneven, as if my body was desperately trying to resist the overwhelming force of everything I had been through. The weight of knowing my life would never be the same pressed down like a heavy anchor, an invisible burden threatening to crush me again. Emotions flooded inside. Fear, a flickering hope, doubt, and above all, a desperate need to accept that this had truly happened to me. Even as my mind tried to reason, a part of me knew deep down that my soul bore scars, hidden wounds no one saw, but that hurt nonetheless. These invisible marks were like internal scars, vividly felt even if unseen, reminding me that my resilience was fragile but still present. Inside, I fought against the impulse to give up, knowing that what I experienced outside, beyond the physical, was a war still raging. Jesus' presence, which had always invaded my darkest fears, continued to be there, silent but powerful. The invisible hope that, even in the greatest hardship, my soul could endure, guided by divine mercy. I knew ultimately that my survival was more than physical. It was an inner battle, the fear of recalling the darkness versus the strength to stay firm in the light he had left in my heart. As my thoughts gradually began to settle, a strange sensation took hold inside me. It was as if something had been torn away, a piece of my understanding, part of myself I couldn't fully recover despite my efforts. My mind felt marked by a profound change, like a canvas that's been partially erased, leaving traces of an image still struggling to be reconstructed. The reality around me now seemed more distorted, more disfigured. It was as if my mind was trapped in a kind of subconscious nightmare, a fragmented memory of a battle that seemed never-ending. Often, I felt a mixture of confusion and difficulty discerning what was real, what had been my truth before, and what was a consequence of that journey through the unknown. My perception of the world shifted, in a way I couldn't quite explain. It was as if a layer of illusions, of falsehoods I carried, had been stripped away, making me vulnerable yet more sensitive. Every new moment was an attempt to understand this new reality, scarred by invisible marks and wounds that no one else perceived, but that my mind felt with an almost unpronounceable intensity. My awareness now carried a heavier weight, like I bore a burden from a cosmic battle that had left deep scars in my essence. And even with Jesus' presence, who invaded my moments of fear and doubt, I held the certainty that my mind would never be the same again. That this new perception was part of my transformation, a reminder that true peace would only come when I accepted that the path to light involved losing parts of what I thought was mine. Even though everything around me seemed quiet, I felt a delicate presence within, a silent message that remained etched into my soul. It was as if something from that other side still lingered with me, a memory, a guidance insisting on existing beyond words. I sensed, deep within, that my survival at that moment was a temporary victory, a hope that still needed nurturing, despite the entire battle. An invisible force reminded me that what I managed to escape, the fear, the darkness, the shadows, had not yet been fully defeated. It was a certainty I couldn't explain, a feeling that everything still echoed into eternity. Like a whispered message that the fight doesn't end with physical return, but continues deep within my soul. This silent message, almost imperceptible, told me that what was done on the other side remained with me, in my memory, in my spirit, and that, even in the greatest hardship, my survival was merely a step, an ongoing battle that had not yet concluded. It was as if, in that silence, was engraved the strength that hope never fades, even when everything seems lost. What stayed was the certainty that Jesus' mercy, which invaded my darkest moments, had left permanent marks, signs of resilience, of faith, that the divine's presence never abandons those who strive to move forward. And that even in the greatest darkness, my soul carried the memory that there is something greater than us, a hope that remains alive as long as the fight continues. As I walk through the world now, I notice my steps seem carried by a silent force, an invisible mark that nobody can see, but which I feel at every moment. These are scars imprinted on my soul, traces of a battle beyond human understanding, a clash of light and darkness that left deep marks, like burns upon my very essence. Each daily task, each thought or emotion seems to carry them in some way. These marks aren't visible to the naked eye, but are like signs of a struggle I lived, not just within myself, but in a cosmic conflict that crossed the limits of the physical and spiritual worlds. They are small, invisible wounds, vital scars reminding me that my survival is only a provisional victory, a step in a greater journey. I realize these marks come with a weight, the reminder that my journey did not end there, that there is still a constant fight to keep hope alive, to prevent despair from overwhelming me again. Each scar is a reminder that the fight for light is eternal, that Jesus' mercy has left its marks on my soul, so I never forget who I am or what I still need to overcome. And despite this weight, I feel a silent strength, hope that one day these marks will turn into signs of ultimate victory, signals that Jesus' mercy is greater than any darkness. These scars, invisible to the world, serve as proof that my soul endured, and that hope, even fragile, remains alive, fueled by that eternal divine presence. After everything I experienced, I realize I didn't receive a definitive lesson or a clear hope to embrace with all my strength. What remains with me is the feeling that, for now, I managed to escape something that nearly consumed me, a silent, invisible force that almost dragged me into the abyss. In that moment, a silence descended, something greater than any words could convey. There were no final teachings, only the memory that my survival was a brief victory, a fragile win that demanded ongoing resistance from me. It's as if even having escaped danger, my soul remained on alert, ever waiting for shadows to re-emerge and threaten again. That absence of a concrete lesson, of a promise of lasting peace, leaves me with a sense of fragility. All I know is that, at that instant, I managed to flee from what seemed to be inevitable destruction, yet I still feel like a war persists within my soul. And Jesus, who invaded my darkest moments with a mercy-filled force, remains there, guarding my heart, holding on to the hope that even in my most vulnerable state, divine grace continues to sustain me. That's why I walk forward with a heavy heart, but with the certainty that as long as Jesus is by my side, my struggle isn't in vain. Hope, no matter how small, still flickers. An enduring flame that resists shadows, reminding me that my survival is just a step along the journey, and that true liberation will come at the right moment, in the eternal presence of the divinity. Even with that momentary victory, I sense that something still lingers in the shadows around me. Tiny sensations, invisible reminders that even having escaped, there remains a force attempting to drag my soul into the abyss. Every night, as the light retreats, these shadows seem to creep closer, trying to rekindle old pains and fears. I fear that this silent danger might return someday to take over me, an invisible shadow trying to recover what's lost, a force that insists on pulling me back into that eternal silence. It's an unseen battle, a constant struggle to preserve my hope, my peace, and my faith. Inside, my emotions still vibrate with anguish, knowing that the war for my spirit never truly ends. But even amid this fear, there's something greater that sustains me. Jesus' presence invading my darkest moments. His mercy continues with me. A fragile thread of hope that reminds me that even if shadows try to enfold me, His light never fully goes out. Even if fear persists and threatens me, it's His strength that fortifies my resistance, making me continue fighting bravely, even though I feel like my home is a constant battle. Because deep down, I know these shadows are only illusions, lies that attempt to deceive my wounded soul. And as long as Jesus walks with me, holding my loving hand, my chains of fear may try to break free, but they will never extinguish the hope He has planted within me. Every day I feel my mind is a constant battlefield. Thoughts of fear, doubts, and shadows attempt to invade my inner space, like invaders disguised as hope. It's an ongoing struggle to strengthen my resistance, a silent battle against the voices of darkness that relentlessly try to pull me back into the abyss. I have to fight to keep alive the memory that my life was saved by a higher force, the mercy of Jesus, who invaded my darkest moments to protect me. It's a conscious effort to maintain awareness of His presence, even when the shadows seem intent on erasing everything. I try to focus on prayer, on recalling His mercy, His teachings, as a shield against these intrusive thoughts trying to convince me that darkness will always return. Although my mind may want to forget, my soul knows that resistance is essential. Every effort to reinforce my faith is like a spark against the overwhelming cold of doubt. I understand that as long as I maintain my connection with Jesus, this inner strength grows, creating an invisible barrier, a light that prevents darkness from taking over me again. No matter how much fear and doubt try to drown me in darkness, there is a greater certainty. My hope remains alive, nourished by the love of the divinity that has never abandoned me, even in the hardest times. I know that day by day, my greatest victory is precisely this: strengthening my resilience, trusting the mercy that has left marks of hope upon my soul, and believing that, as long as Jesus is with me, the battle, even the toughest, will be won. Even after literally escaping the abyss, I feel a calm that isn't peace, but a silent anguish, a kind of deadly stillness hanging over me. It's as if, in the silence of the night, an invisible force watches closely, waiting for the right moment to pull me back into shadows. There are no screams or clear manifestations, but this unseen threat is present, whispering in my mind, trying to convince me that the danger isn't over. that the battle still continues. It's a disturbingly helpless calm, and sometimes I fear this silence might turn into the next assault from those hidden forces. A feeling that even having escaped death, something still seeks to dominate me. Perhaps an essence that resists in the darkness, ready to recover what it's lost. However, there's a greater force that supports me. Jesus' presence, invading these moments with silent mercy. A light penetrating my soul, even in the deepest, deadliest silence. His light reminds me that, even in the most profound quietude, my hope remains alive. His presence is a reminder that this invisible threat, as cruel or silent as it may be, is never stronger than divine love. Love that invaded my darkest moments to ensure my soul's continued resistance. I know that, as long as he is with me, even if I do not see him, even if I sometimes doubt, my resistance will continue. And even in the deepest despairing calm, my hope is nourished by this eternal force which never extinguishes, even in the deadly silence I sometimes find myself in. In the deep silence that settled around me, I feel that something is still lingering in the air. A sensation that, even though I barely escaped, the threat still remains in the shadows, hidden and waiting. It's a silent hope that persists, even when everything seems lost. The battle, seemingly won for now, endures in the stillness, an invisible war that never truly ends. Even with Jesus' presence invading my moments of greatest fear, doubt, uncertainty, and the invisible scars on my soul remain, the sense that darkness is still close, ready to reapproach, never fully disappears. But in that silence, what I really want to understand is that my hope was never completely destroyed. It remains there, hidden near the border of my heart. Fed by silent inspirations, reminders that divine love never abandons those who keep fighting. Thus, even knowing that the struggle is eternal, I continue resisting, sustained by the certainty that Jesus' mercy, who invaded my darkest moments, is the greatest strength I possess. Whether in the greatest darkness or in mortal calm, my hope remains alive, because I know that as long as Jesus is with me, my fight is not in vain. And even if the silence seems absolute, my soul holds within it the strength of hope that will never be fully consumed, for Christ's mercy is greater than any darkness.
If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Share this video with someone who needs a message of hope and light. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more inspiring content like this. Together, we can spread love and awareness beyond this life.